So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandy, and I am with Da Vinci Laboratories. Before we get started today, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. The first thing is that I'm going to have everyone on mute so we don't disrupt the presentation, but please use the chat feature if you have any questions at all. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. Just for attending this webinar today, I would love to send you a copy of Dr. Taz's book, Superwoman RX, where you can discover the secrets to lasting health. If you'd like a copy of this book, please email me your mailing address to bkanya, that's B-K-A-N-Y-A, at foodsciencecorp.com. I will also add my email address to this chat feature. Just to give you a heads up, I'm having a bit of a problem getting these books shipped into Canada as with being the hardcover book. So if you are in Canada and you have a U.S. address you could send me, that would be wonderful. All right, so let's get started. This amazing webinar series is brought to you by Da Vinci Laboratories. For over 45 years, Da Vinci has been a leader in nutritional research, product development, innovation from our home state of Vermont. We are a family-owned company, and we are always willing to assist you in any way possible on matters relating to nutrition. And now you can see my email and not the presentation. In 2019, in collaboration with Dr. Matt Hand from Dartmouth Children's Hospital, we launched our newest supplement line, Little Da Vinci. Little Da Vinci's products are the first kid-focused supplements to contain active forms of ingredients at levels based on actual clinical studies to put our kids on a path to sustainable, good health, nutrition, balanced diet through daily exercise and proper nutrition. That is why we are beyond excited to partner with board-certified integrative medicine physician and wellness expert, Dr. Taz, who has gained national recognition as a best-selling author. Dr. Taz's mission is to empower 1 million women to find their superpowers, restore their health and well-being, and embrace their purpose and gift. So welcome, Dr. Taz.
Thank you. I hope everybody is having a great day. I know we're in the holidays and there's a lot going on, so for those of you joining me, I appreciate it. But we're going to talk a little bit today. The last couple lectures, we talked a lot about the East-West approach to conception and fertility and a preconception plan and a pregnancy plan. Now we're going to focus on the other end of it, which is postpartum recovery. And for any of you that might be moms or new moms, you probably know this topic really well. I myself had a really tough postpartum period with my daughter, my first one, and I wish, looking at this information today, I wish I had all of it to use back then. But, we're going to start with just this idea of postpartum recovery and what it means today. It's a very important part of the mom-child connection, and I think a lot of times when that connection falls apart, sort of that fraying really begins right here. Now, postpartum recovery for most of us, and I was in this camp as well, for most modern women, it's a lot about let's have that baby, let's lose your baby weight, let's figure out what you need to do to get back to work, and let's try as hard as you can to make it through those first 6 weeks so that the baby at least gets 6 weeks of breastfed milk. And, in that sort of discourse that we all do with ourselves, there's really not much taken into account in terms of the fact that may not exactly be the same coming out of this process, that breastfeeding is certainly not easy no matter what anyone tells you, and that not every woman loses their weight magically in 6 weeks or even in 3 months, and it can really create havoc with how we just feel about ourselves after having a baby. Next slide. One of the things that, we go to the next slide. You guys all see there we go, perfect. All right, so one of the things we really want to be thinking through is how do we approach postpartum a little bit differently? And we know that this is a need just based on some of the statistics that we're seeing today. So for example, up to 70% of women today, this is today now, have some sort of baby blues, meaning they get depressed, they feel down, they just don't feel good about themselves, they feel like their identity has changed, and they struggle with a lot of those different emotions, which can make them unattached or uninvolved with their baby in some of the cases. 10 to 20% of women actually have postpartum clinical depression, diagnosed depression, and usually they will never go to the doctor for it. So it goes undiagnosed, and then will turn around and affect the mom-child interaction and also affect relationships that the mom have. I thought this was interesting. This was from the Journal of Psychosomatic OBGYN. This is a June 2005 study, so it is a little bit older, but the data is still valid. It did a random sampling of women in the postpartum period and just kind of went through some of the common issues that many of them face. So some of you, if you're in that postpartum period, maybe feeling this way too, where you're excessively tired or fatigued, you have a lot of backaches. Those were big ones. Sore or cracked nipples, that was a big one that can be so incredibly painful. Those three were in the top 98% of the complaints that most women today face in the postpartum period. Then there's also perineal pain, hemorrhoids, bowel issues, headaches, bladder problems, more coughs and colds than usual, not being able to have sex or sexual issues, and then a lot of problems with birth control. The interesting thing about this particular study, and this is why a holistic approach to postpartum recovery is so desperately needed, is that in this particular study, the women that had the most sort of bowel issue, bladder issue, perineal issues, hemorrhoids, those were actually the women who had been abused. And the women that had had a lot of adult emotional abuse, and that could be abuse within their relationship, abuse in the workplace, or wherever it is, those were the women that got sick the most frequently and that actually had a lot more coughs and colds and had trouble recovering. So again, the sort of overlay of our emotional makeup, our subconscious, with how we feel, and then with what we experience is an incredibly important concept that I think modern medicine misses a mark on, but it's just beginning to try to understand. On to the next slide. Thanks. So the majority of studies today will talk about the need for social support. So we're not so behind where we don't understand that women need a lot of support. They need community. In fact, I was interviewing a women's health expert recently, and she was talking about how women really have to thrive in a village. That's just the way they're wired. They do better in community. They do better when there are many other women around them. So this study in particular that I put up here from the NIH, or that's on the NIH side, is all about how really helping women in the postpartum period, helping them understand that they can't be isolated. They need social support, they need a partner support, they need a lot of different types of support to be successful. So we're just beginning to understand the depths of that and how important that support is. So much so that ACOG, we can move on to the next slide also, ACOG in May of 2018 called for really redefining what postpartum visits are. So many women will go to the doctor maybe immediately after having a child, but then they won't go again after that. They won't return to the doctor. They're doing a lot of their pediatric visits, but they're not doing much more than that. And in fact, the statistics tell us that almost 40% of women are not getting postpartum care. And that's staggering to me. They're not visiting the doctor. And the reason why, again, it's not sort of culturally or medically ingrained that we need to see the doctor and take care of ourselves, just as much as we need to take care of the baby. And this is a concept that we'll see in just a minute is very different from what we see in sort of Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and some of those type of things. Next slide as well. ACOG set about to really try to in May of 2018, really try to redefine what the postpartum visit should be and really to change kind of their definition of what's happening there. So some of the things, one of the first changes they made was that instead of a standard 6-week visit, they moved it to at least a 3-week check-in, and that could be a screening phone call or an in-office visit. But that 3-week check-in being very important to sort of assessing where the mom is and what's happening with her. We can move on to the next slide. These are some of the additional recommendations that ACOG made as well, and I think they're important for us to go over. One concept that they stress very strongly is that to optimize the health of women and infants, postpartum care should be ongoing. It's not a single visit, right, like it had been for all these years, but it should be ongoing with lots of services and support tailored to a woman's needs and maybe individually packaged to that particular woman. So while one woman might need a 3-week, 6-week, 12-week visit, another one may need a 3, 4, 6, 7, 8-week visit, depending on what's going on with them, and that should be covered by insurance and honored and respected. They also talked about how really developing that postpartum plan while you're pregnant is critical, and I agree with that. So really thinking through who's going to be your support, who's going to take care of you, who's going to help you. So many women tell these stories of like having a baby, they get help for a week, all the baby descends, then everybody disappears and they're kind of left alone in this very vulnerable time frame. And the 3-week mark is where a lot of the hormone changes really start to hit. So sometimes that is the toughest part of the meeting. All women should have some sort of contact with a medical provider within 3 weeks. And again, the timing should be individualized. They also said that women that had preterm birth, gestational diabetes, hypertension, or pregnancy, all of these women need to be counseled about their risk for cardiometabolic disease and actually be screened themselves for high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and some of the other disorders that sneak up down the road. And last but not least, ACOG, which again is American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, they recognize that one of the biggest issues is that your pregnancy and your postpartum period will sort of dictate the way the rest of your health will play out. And we see this in practice all the time, where women who don't have the right support and are not taking care of themselves really well, in turn have a lot more disease and disease patterns down the road. So in addition to screening, as you see here, for vaginal health, breast health, skin, hair, mood, all of those different things, having that 3-week visit, having that 12-week postpartum visit, and then continuing that relationship with a medical provider, that is the basics of maybe a postpartum recovery plan that if you or someone you know that's had a child is not doing, I would strongly encourage them to do it. So this is probably maybe thinking through layer 1, like at least to make sure that this is happening for the women that you know or for yourself, because this is to me is the most basic sort of approach to postpartum recovery. But moving on from what the OBGYN community says or what research says, we want to really dive into more of an east-west approach to postpartum recovery. And in other systems of medicine, like Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, postpartum recovery was, again, like ACOG just said, it wasn't a single encounter, but it was actually seen in phases. And the first phase was a vulnerable phase of coming home and going all the way up to 6 weeks. And in that phase, just like conventional medicine, Chinese medicine practitioners and Ayurvedic medicine practitioners would screen for vaginal health, for mood symptoms, for social support, who's with the community. They would look at the nutrition very critically, which is something that doesn't happen in current postpartum visits. And they would also critically evaluate partner support. And it's interesting, we're going to take a look at it in just a minute, but partner support was less important in kind of the Ayurvedic and Eastern cultures. It was more about the village's support or the entire community support and a bunch of women together. So let's take a look at this. Let's move into sort of phase 1 postpartum recovery from an East-West perspective. Now, you know, the two sort of systems, Eastern systems of medicine that I really love the most are Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. And just to remind everybody, Ayurveda is an old Indian system of medicine. It's about 5,000 years old. Chinese medicine is thousands of years old as well. In Ayurveda, the prescription for a woman when she came home was to rest for 42 days. They were very precise about it. They said it took 42 days for a woman to recover, let alone for the baby. And the woman was as important as the baby. And so the woman would have maybe her mom, her partner's mom, her sisters, all these different people come together to really support her. And then there would be another team there to truly support the baby. And in those 42 days, what Ayurveda talks about, you know, if you remember from other lectures, Ayurveda divides people into types. So there's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Each type has different positives and negatives, and we talk about it in the Superwoman RX a lot if you don't know what those types are. But in the postpartum period, all women, irrespective of what kind of type you are, all women become very heavily Vata, meaning they become very disconnected from their body. They have a lot of wind quality, air quality, they're depleted. So this concept of depletion runs very strong through Ayurvedic medicine. So they're typically depleted of fluids, of protein, of fat. So the goal in Ayurveda was for this 42-day period to replete the woman, to build her back up and give her kind of everything she needs. And they would do this using some different approaches. But it was not just, and we're going to talk about the herbs and the nutrition in just a minute, but it was not just herbs and nutrition, it was also lifestyle. They didn't want a woman to hear loud noises, so they would put like a scarf around her ears. They didn't want wind to leave her head, so they would put a headscarf on her. She wasn't supposed to exercise excessively. How many of you get out there and start exercising right away after having a baby because you're trying to lose that baby weight. And then loud sounds, extreme weather, none of that. All of that was seen as incredibly depleting to somebody who was already very depleted in the process of having a child. Flipping gears for just a minute into the world of traditional Chinese medicine, they also have what they call sitting a month. So there's a Chinese word for it, which I don't want to try to say because I don't want to butcher it. But the sitting a month, you would basically sit out for a month, go to rest, and same idea. You wouldn't move you wouldn't have excessive movement or excessive stress. I laugh because I started my practice around the same time I had both children, so I definitely didn't follow this principle of sitting out a month. But the language that Chinese medicine used was that birth takes you from a yang state, where you've got a lot of blood and a lot of fluid and everything circulating around, to a yin state where you're very cold and you're losing energy, you're losing qi. So you have to rewarm the woman, you have to invigorate the woman. She has to rest, she has to be replenished, and it's only after she sits out for a full month, full 30 days, would she be ready to re-enter into regular life and into regular society. Both these systems of medicine even said things like, you're not supposed to take a shower. Showers were depleting, they were draining. You were not supposed to eat cold food. You're not supposed to eat raw food. So let's move on to the nutrition part of how East-West medicine looks at postpartum recovery. Nutrition was a very critical part of this. It was so important. And Ayurveda and Chinese medicine both had different strategies, but they were common in thinking that the postpartum woman was incredibly depleted. She had lost fluids. It was an opportunity to replete her, but their strategies to repleting were foods that many of us don't eat today. Let's take a look. So in Ayurveda, for example, women would, the community would make something called khichdi, where you take mung beans. I talk about this in my book, The Belly Fix, and the recipes in the Superwoman RX as well. But basically, you would take mung beans and you would soak them and then boil them and cook it with rice and add a lot of ghee to it. Ghee is a healthy fat. We know today that ghee balances the microbiome. It's a hormone supporter, all of those good things. So they would add ghee, and that combination would help give the woman energy. They would say it would restore her vitality, it would calm the Vata energy down, and it would bring her back to herself. They also believed in a lot of cooked vegetables, and they wouldn't introduce grain. I think that was so interesting too. They didn't think the woman's digestive system was ready for grain until about a week or 2 weeks later after this postpartum period. So those were some of the initial steps that they would take phase 1 postpartum recovery. On the Chinese medicine side, a little bit different, similar but different. So yes, they also recommend a lot of fat. They recommend soft food, but they have this tremendous emphasis on bones, soup from bones, bone broth, something called congee, which is sort of a gel almost of animal protein. It's like a gelatin. It's probably the best way to think about it. They would do this soup and this broth from pig's feet, which they felt like really reinvigorated the woman. So they were very intent on building the gut, the digestive system, and energy through the use of soups. So that was an interesting piece of Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine in terms of how they would supply nutrients to women. Organ meats were a big part of Chinese medicine as well, not so much in Ayurveda, but definitely a big part of Chinese medicine, because they believe the organ meats had this incredible store of iron in it, and that would also help women. Let's move on to the next slide. In addition to nutrition, there was also kind of an emphasis on a lot of different teas and herbs, and I want to talk about that. So some of the herbs in Ayurvedic medicine, 3 that I like to talk about. The first one is shatavari. Shatavari is an herb that was believed to replenish all the reproductive tissue and organs that had now been depleted because of childbirth. So shatavari is something we carry in the practice and we're big believers in, but it was thought to give energy, to bring hormone balance back, and to really replenish women. Ashwagandha was used a lot. Some of you might be familiar with ashwagandha. It's an herb as well. But that was used for energy. So taking ashwagandha a couple times a day was advocated to kind of restore energy, and we can do that today too, through pills or teas, and they seem great. And then fennel was introduced too to help lactation, because the thought was the combination between fennel and fenugreek, putting that together as a tea and an herbal combination, help the woman, but also help the child, so help them with lactation and help them to produce a sufficient amount of breast milk. In Chinese medicine, on the other hand, they used a lot of goji berries. Goji berries, again, you might have seen those brightly colored red berries. So goji berries were used to replenish women, had a lot of antioxidants in them, gave them energy, gave them sustenance. So that was a big part of their herbal formulas and their herbal remedies. Support in this community had a little bit of a different take than what we think of today. Let me give you an example. Let's move on to the next slide. So first of all, in the East-West world, support and community was not about the nuclear family. It was certainly not about the husband, the wife, and maybe one or two other people entering in and out. It was literally the entire extended family. So aunts, cousins, nephews, nieces, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, they would all come together to welcome the birth of this child. And that's how these concepts of sitting the month or resting for 40 days were able to be realistic or practical. In addition to that, a lot of these women would help the new mother participate in different rituals. And one of those rituals was something called in Ayurveda called Abhyanga, which is oil massage. So again, this concept that the woman is depleted, she's cold, she's very vata, so you bring heat to her. So they would use Brahmi oil, Ringraj oil, or sesame oil to massage the woman and the infant in a very particular way to bring energy back to them to help heat them up. So Abhyanga was a form of massage that was advocated very clearly in these first 6 weeks. Same is true in Chinese medicine, where Tuina for the infant and a similar form of massage for the new mom was important as well. Let's move on to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit now. So that's probably the summary of phase 1. So up to 6 weeks in this postpartum period is rest from sound, noise, light, extremes, weather, temperature, a lot of healing foods, different in the two systems of medicine, but ultimately foods that support the gut and replenish our digestive system, and then support from the community and a lot of self-care. So that was sort of the prescription that you would get in the first 6 weeks. But moving on, some women bounce back in those first 6 weeks. A lot of women don't. So thinking through, actually we can go back to the last slide, probably okay, but we can go back, but thinking through why, the whys of why some women do well and some women don't. Now, a lot of that was totally dependent in the Eastern systems of medicine on how you did in the sort of first 6 weeks. If you had taken your proper rest, taken time to recover, done what you were supposed to do, then the village elders would think that, okay, in the next 6 weeks, you'll probably do okay. But it was still not a license to get out there and be 100%. You still had a lot of support. But here's what everybody was worried about. All systems of medicine kind of merging together. This is the beauty of integrative medicine. Everybody was worried about where hormones would stand. Because this is a time where hormones would fluctuate. So many women would start to experience things like hair loss or get their periods for the very first time. So what sort of support do they need with those changes? This is also a time where breastfeeding, you would either quit or you would move on and continue to breastfeed. In Eastern cultures, there were huge advocates of breastfeeding, right? They were old systems of medicine. So women would breastfeed, but as they continued to breastfeed, they also needed another layer of support, because breastfeeding at this time was too thought to be very depleting. And this is what we're seeing today in science and in research, that breastfeeding needs an equivalent amount of support. We can move on to the next slide. The other concern, sort of in this East-West perspective, was phase 2, the 6 weeks to 12 weeks that we were talking about, was also a time frame where there was risk for not establishing that mom-child connection in its entirety. So while there's concern in the first 6 weeks with postpartum depression due to shifting hormone changes and not being able to have attachment and bonding with the baby, the concern in the next was more resentment, not liking moms that don't like their new role, that are uncomfortable in their new role, or again, because of lack of support, are feeling overwhelmed, like this is never going to end. So this was another thing to screen for, so to speak, in phase 2. In addition to that, postpartum depression for women was a big deal even in Eastern cultures. So this is where they would very much kind of judge and see where women are, what they needed to be doing to really prevent postpartum depression. In phase 2, moving on from phase 2 and into phase 3 postpartum recovery, remember, is from 12 weeks to 6 months. And this is where the regimen started to shift. We didn't shift regimens too dramatically in phase 2 because honestly in phase 2 is a lot of continuation of phase 1, but with the same amount of support, understanding that there were going to be hormone changes, understanding that weight fluctuates too. Phase 3, though, was where women were thought they should be able to kind of fly. So this is moving on from 12 weeks all the way up to 6 months. Another big transitional time for the majority of women. In this phase as well, nutrition was emphasized along with breastfeeding support. And along with in the modern day culture, like we talk about today, how a woman can be more independent. Because up until this point in Eastern culture, she's been highly dependent on everybody around her. But now, how do we re-engage her in society? How do we help her to continue independent? So the strategy here shifts. In Ayurvedic medicine, they would shift to a diet now. Remember, they were doing a lot of mung beans, a lot of vegetables, those type of things. But now at this point, they're switching to a diet much, much higher in protein to, again, give women the energy that they needed to do what they had to do in any environment. More beans, more legumes, these are the type of things that were typically recommended. A lot of soups were recommended too, sort of in this phase 3, and they were all for different reasons. So being cognizant of the fact that women's hormones change, seaweed soup was a common recommendation in both Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, because the thought was that the seaweed soup provided a lot of iodine, and whether they knew it or not, they were helping to support the thyroid. Again, that pork soup in traditional Chinese medicine was used a lot. Some cultures used tomato soup as a healing soup in this phase because they were concerned about inflammation. They didn't know the word inflammation. They were concerned about the joints having issues. They actually cited this particular phase of postpartum. Remember, we're 3 months out now. They cited this particular phase as a phase in which most women start to complain about joint pain, joint swelling, weird rashes, what we would today call auto-type symptoms. So tomato soup with turmeric and all kinds of different spices was often used to help or prescribed literally as something to have on a regular basis. In Mexico, they used a lot of chicken soup, same idea. You need the protein, you need the broth. And then kind of in Asia, they would use a lot of green papaya fish soup from the bones to, again, help digestion. That was the reasoning there, to build iron stores from the bones and to also support the gut. So this was how some of the dietary advice would shift as you would go phase to phase. In addition to that, acupuncture becomes much more important sort of in phase 3 of a postpartum woman. This is where, the warming phases ended. She got depleted. She was in a yin state. Now she's hopefully some of that energy and fluid is getting depleted. So now is an appropriate time to bring acupuncture into the picture, because remember, acupuncture should typically be done when you are not deficient. It's hard to do acupuncture when you're highly deficient because you don't have the energy there to move. So acupuncture was brought into the picture around this time, and things like massage and sort of the self-care component continued to be recommended. So as a woman ventured kind of from phase 3 all the way through into kind of her next whatever role in life she was, they were warned to not get pregnant back to back, even though many women did, because the thought was that you don't fully recover until you have at least a solid year to a year and a half of a break from breastfeeding, from caring for another newborn before you have yet another. And so in Eastern cultures, both in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, they were both fans and believers of spacing children and spacing them appropriately. The general recommendation was at least 2 years so that women had a chance to recover and recuperate. And they also noticed, even though they didn't have the research or the data, that women that had back-to-back-to-back pregnancies or back-to-back children were the one that had the most health issues down the road. And I know from practice, this is something that we're seeing over and over again as, many of us have children later, and then we're in a rush to have children, and we end up having different health issues as we get down the health spectrum and get a little bit older. So when we want to put all this together and really have truly an East-West approach to postpartum recovery, I'm sorry, I don't know why it's showing up that way, but there are a couple of things to think about. I think at the end of the day, whether we're looking at what ACOG is saying with their recommendations and their guidelines in terms of what postpartum care should look like, or we're looking at sort of what the Eastern medical models are saying in terms of what our guidelines should look like, there are a couple of things that we can merge, and this is the beauty of integrative medicine, so you can really truly get a postpartum recovery plan. And when I try to put the two together, hopefully you have somewhere you can take notes, but this is what I think your personalized postpartum recovery plan needs to look like. Both places talk about the need for social support. So the first thing, if you're pregnant, start to create that postpartum plan. If you've already had a baby or you're thinking about a baby, then you need to jump on. The sooner you jump on that, the better. So postpartum recovery plan, the first element of that, more than what doctor you're going to go to or what hospital you're going to deliver, is what type of support do you have? You know, a partner is great, a supportive partner is wonderful, but oftentimes they can't be present with you in the home for an extended period of time. So having a community of girlfriends, of moms, sisters, you know, neighbors, whoever it is, really lined up to help you, I think is critical for those first 6 weeks, especially after you've had a baby. If you don't have that naturally built in, well, then create it through community members, through spiritual community that you might know. But the importance of community is something that probably takes precedence over all the other data and details that we obsess about when we're having children, because that ultimately is what is bearing out in success. So first step, develop that support group, develop that tribe of women, really have the people that are going to step in and help take care of you, because that's probably going to be things. I think second, as a part of your East-West postpartum or more holistic postpartum recovery plan, is to really make sure you understand your own health. I think many women go into pregnancy and they have no idea where their health is. So really pay attention to things like where are your nutrients? What is your digestive health like? Where are your hormones currently? Because as you go into having a baby and then fluctuating over these 3 phases of the postpartum period, then you are going to notice that there are shifts and changes that are going to be hard to explain if you don't know what you're doing. So I think it's really important, you know, if you're pregnant or thinking about having a baby, and if you've had a baby, wherever you are in this journey, there's no like you have to do this then. To really just get some basic screening labs with your medical provider and build that provider team. So the first was social support. Second would be to build that provider team. And that provider team should consist of a medical doctor, a doula maybe, a nutritionist to help you, or somebody to help you with meal planning, maybe a massage therapist to help you with recovery after the fact, somebody who's good at pre and postnatal massage. But really build that recovery team so you have who you might need to go to as when things get a little bit chaotic and it's hard to think through. So in that provider team, though, I would ask for things to be checked. I would have your inflammation markers checked. I would have vitamins D, B, and iron checked to know where those are, because those are critical to how you're going to feel down the road and kind of what your stores are and if you're depleted, you know, what extra support you may need from a nutritional standpoint. I would develop a personalized supplement plan for you. And I would periodically have your thyroid, your adrenal hormones like your DHEA, your estrogen, progesterone, and your insulin checked to understand where those are fluctuating, because those are going to also impact your long-term health and potentially trigger inflammation. So your social support, your provider team. After building that provider team, probably the next place to go is to really have a good handle on nutrition and nutrition for you. And so here's where we can take from some of the old systems of medicine and really focus on maybe having some of those broths, some of those really dense nutrient foods in your kitchen or your pantry or your refrigerator to help really restore digestive health. I think it's important. Understanding that those are the types of foods you need that heal you and heal the body. The processed, the convenience foods of today's culture are not really going to cut it. Developing a personalized supplement plan, and I think I can safely say that no matter who you are or what issues you may have, there are probably 3 to 4 supplements I think every woman in the postpartum period would benefit from. The one is methylated B vitamins to help with energy and to help with mood. That's one for sure. If you're still having a lot of issues with mood, remember you can get methyl B12 shots at different places or IV vitamin therapy. All of that helps to kind of boost your mood. So that's one. The second is shutberry, that Ayurvedic herb I mentioned early on. It's one of my favorites, and it really does help to repair reproductive tissue. So that's one you might want to try as well. Banyan Botanicals and Da Vinci. I don't know if Da Vinci has it, but there's some different companies that have that particular herb. So that's a good one for you. We have it on our website as well. So shutberry is a good one. Ashwagandha, which I think Da Vinci has. But ashwagandha is a great one for energy, especially through phase 1 and phase 2 of your postpartum recovery, because ashwagandha is going to help to balance the hormones a little bit. It'll protect your thyroid to a certain extent as well, because it'll prevent you from getting drained out. So let's see, we talked about shutberry, methylated bees, ashwagandha. If I could pick one more for you to take, I'd probably focus on lactation. So doing fennel and fenugreek to really help optimize your lactation would probably be next pick. So that's a very general supplement plan for postpartum recovery. And then, you can tailor it once you know your own individual levels, like we talked about with some of those labs, and you can tailor it to what you in particular need. Now, the only other thing that I would put on a postpartum plan, is to make sure you do make it to those. Yes, you can take Sheffery and ashwagandha while breastfeeding. Those are safe. I know there's some debate there. But to make sure you make it to your medical appointments. I was shocked to see that statistic. Like 40% of you guys can't or don't make it to your postpartum appointments. But that's where screening for vaginal health, and if you have any concerns about your libido or sexuality or things like that, those can be addressed. Really someone else from the outside looking at your mood and trying to decide if you need more support when it comes to depression. I think that's important. So I think it's really important not only to have that medical provider team, but also to make those appointments. And it's easy to drop them because you're preparing for another, but I think it's so important. And then I think having a self-care plan would probably be the fourth or fifth element of a good postpartum recovery plan. And that self-care plan would include everything from scheduling massage, doing acupuncture, exercising, but not aggressively exercising in phase 1 and phase 2 of your recovery, of really doing more gentle exercises like walking, yoga, swimming. Those are things that are a little bit easier on the body and prevent inflammation down the road. And then I think maybe in phase 3, the more aggressive exercise is okay as long as you're feeling good and you're really up to par there. So those are, to me, the elements of a postpartum recovery plan when we take into account both Eastern and Western medicine and try to incorporate both their philosophy, whether it's sitting the month or the 42 days, along with some of the diet and herbal recommendations, along with the self-care, but most importantly, that very, very strong concept that they have that a woman should be honored, that she needed as much care as the baby needed, and that she needed the community of support and the sort of people around her to make sure that was actually happening. So I think I'll stop there and then see if you guys have questions, and we'll go from there.
Okay, this is Brandy back with Da Vinci. If anyone has any additional questions, you can go ahead and add them to the chat box. If you are interested in a book, please go ahead and email me. My email address is in the chat window. Thank you, Michelle. And Emily, I will get those books out to you this week. I sit through these and I listen, and I have already had children, and I find these invaluable. Every time I think I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be the moderator and I'm going to get all this work done, and I've done nothing because I'm so engaged with what you're saying. And it's fascinating for me because I've had 3 biological children, and then I have a series of adopted children, and I'm a current foster parent for a 5-week-old baby. So I'm listening to you, and I can't help but think as part of, I've only been in this space for 6 years. Before this, I was not exposed to nutrition and functional medicine and all these wonderful things I've been able to learn in the last 6 years. And I think nobody told me this when I was pregnant, when I wanted to have a baby. Like, nobody told me to take care of me. And, I mean, how different it would have been, if somebody gave me permission to take care of myself. That sort of is missing in the modern, how we as moms receive medicine. If we're not seeking out someone like you, if we don't have an integrative practitioner on our team. And so as I sit here and listen, I'm just thinking, even now, I'm not having any more children, but as I said, I have a 5-week-old in my house, and you've given me permission to say, I can sit, I can take a break, I can sit it out a bit, and that it's amazing. I think just to hear your thoughts on this subject. I hope that everybody else got as much value out of this as I have.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in such a different space. My children are now 10 and 12, and I was in a completely different that space. You might have heard one of them a second ago, but I was planning a practice, you know what I mean? So I was answering emails, and I was running around and taking phone calls, and then I ran to work the ER, and at the time I was the breadwinner, so I was concerned about our finances. And so, you know, all of that, I think, did take its toll on me, for sure. You know, I was depleted. And then it's interesting, because in that depleted state, I had my son, I got pregnant again, and he had a lot of medical issues. His, like, first year of life or so. And so part of me wonders, like, how much of my depletion affected him, how much of my running around in stress indirectly affected him in utero, like we talked about in some of the preconception and the conception PowerPoints that we did. So I do think there's, you know, if I'd only known this, you know, and that's why I hope more women share this with each other, but, you know, we're all super women, right? That's why the whole Super Women RX I wanted to write, because I think we all now have the ability to do anything we want to do in the world, including having children at whatever juncture we choose to have it. However, like, each thing needs to be honored with its own kind of boundaries and respect. And I think the excessive juggling is making women sick, but I think it's also making children sick, because you know, we're not 100%, when we're not present, when we don't feel good, then it's impacting our children in emotional ways, because it's impacting mom-child connection and all that other stuff. But I think time will show that it impacts them. I think all the sensory stuff we're seeing, I think all the sort of the different disorders that we're seeing today, many of which are neurologically oriented, a lot of it is based on just the freneticness that we handle pregnancy or that we handle medical care with. So we can just pull back and honor pregnancy for what it is, and honor having a child for what it is, and sitting on the other end of it. It goes so fast that it's okay to take that time, you know, and really enjoy it, because then you get down the road and you're like, you know, I have some regrets. Like, I don't remember stuff. I don't remember being still and just really soaking in a moment and absorbing it. And it's probably not ideal from a health standpoint. And it's probably definitely not ideal for the mom-child connection. So, you know, I think one thing, if I haven't driven it home with these 3 lectures, is that, you know, the relationship between our health, our mental health, our emotions, our physical health, children's mental, physical, and emotional, so profound. I still see testimonies of that every day in my own life, and I see it in my patients. But the more we can understand and take care of ourselves, the better our children will be, and the better they are, the better we'll feel, because ultimately we're so defined in this role, whether we like it or not. It just is such a defining role.
Yeah, I agree, and I do think you also touched on something that's sort of key, is this community of women, and you kept talking about the elders, and I do find that the further we get from that, the harder that is to find, and doesn't exist unless you, as you said, create it, because you know, I think about my mother-in-law used to tell me stories about how they would get together every week, and they would make pierogies, like, as groups for their family to feed their children, and it's like, I don't even know anyone my age that has done that, or, like, we don't get together to make meals, we don't get together to have conversation hardly, you know. It's like, so I think, you know, the keys to what you're saying and taking care of each other and all of that nurturing element and is missing from today, unless we thoughtfully plan it out and seek that and be that for each other. I mean, so I think once you've gone through it, it's easier for you on the other side to say, to do those things for other women. So.
Absolutely. And do you guys have shuffery? I wasn't sure. Do you have that herb?
Not individually. I don't know. I think it's in one of our blends. I would have to go look that up, but not as an individual. We do have ashwagandha, but the last note, and then unless there's any questions, we'll end the call. But the one thing that I just said this to everything, so I think I'm going to say, like, the 10 things that have been invaluable from here is that I think oftentimes when moms don't take care of themselves and they aren't seeking that medical care, it's way too easy for women to say, oh, it's just because I'm tired, or, oh, I have a new baby, or without ever considering that there are other things going on. You talked about several that years later I'm now experiencing. I became anemic. I had a thyroid issue. I never thought to go get checked after I had a baby because I was just tired because I had a baby. So I think having a close relationship with your practitioner, is, if I could do it again, that would be the one, one of the things I would
I agree.
definitely add. Yeah.
Definitely agree to that.
What a great presentation. I've seen a few more requests come through for your book as well. I have read the book. It's amazing. You guys won't be disappointed. There's also some recipes, and now you've met Dr. Taz, so it's even better.
Yes. Well, happy to connect, and part of my mission and goal is to build that tribe of women so we have each other. So in 2020, I'm trying to figure out how to do that online at the Dr. Taz site, and really just give women that voice and that outlet so that they can find support, amongst us, but then even create some sort of structure so they can find it with.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I know we're kind of going ad lib here, but if you created a Dr. Taz's Facebook community, that might be popular.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Get women and find each other in their parts of the country and connect. Yeah.
And do a meetup of some sort, so that you guys all.
That would be fun. Yeah. So, well, thank you, everyone, for joining today. You guys will get emailed a recording of this. And then anyone that wants the book, go ahead and email me. It's bkanya@foodsciencecorp.com. And on behalf of Da Vinci, thank you very much, Dr. Taz, for providing us with all of your insight through this 3-part webinar series. If this is the first one you've hopped on for, there are 2 other ones that we can send you the recordings on. This has been great. So thank you so much for your time. We value your expertise. And maybe, are you going to the New York conference in February?
I might. We're trying to work out my 2020 schedule, but we're working on it. We'll see.
Okay. I might see you there.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.